First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright, next we have correspondence, visitors, and public comments. Anyone here like to make public comments? Don't see anyone. Have anyone online? We do not. Alright. On to agenda review. Any agenda amendments tonight, Julie?
None come to mind.
I have none. So, we'll move right into presentations and discussion items. First thing up is the board development discussion. Alright, so this is me. So the goals committee met last week to discuss board development. So this is our own education and work as a board. And so, as you know, we're scheduled to do that December 20th as a group with Phil Gore from the Vermont School Board Association. And so we talked a bit about the agenda and what we wanted to accomplish in that meeting, which the plan right now, the draft agenda, is to have a few administrators come, so Julie and some central office folks, I believe is the plan, to focus on, I guess what it means to be the single district thinking that we've talked about a bit, and what we've really accomplished as a merged district, what changes have been made since we merged, what value it's had for our community and for our schools. And so we're going to see some examples of things that have been done, and then give the board the opportunity to kind of lean into those topics and talk about other any thoughts we might have, and kind of probe some of those things that have been done and what maybe needs to be done, and kind of focus on why and when we would be working to standardize and streamline things versus allowing some areas to have their own separate character. So that's kind of the work of that. Talking a little bit more about that governance level thinking, governance level questions, which I think really plays into that first topic. When should we be concerned about things that are different, and when should we not prioritize those things? And then finally, making plans for future board development, because we want this to be an ongoing task for our board, continuing education for us. We've talked about that before, trying to make sure we fit some of this in, 3-4 times a year is, I think, what we had originally discussed. So that's kind of the plan and what's coming up. So any thoughts, questions about that?
We should do a potluck.
We should do it. All right, we can probably organize that. That's probably a good way to handle the evening.
Which date did you say, the first?
December 20th is the plan for that, yep. So we'll likely that night have an open session, because we've still got budget work to do. So probably a short open session to discuss any changes, updates to the budget, and then we'll move into the board development session.
So, and that's scheduled to be in Huggy?
Yes. Yep.
And time-wise, are we allotting for extra time, or are we just keeping it the same window of time?
So, great question. We actually, I should have mentioned that. We had thought of starting at 6 to do that budget piece, and then starting at 6:30 for our board development, and then trying to keep that to probably 6:30 to 8:30. So I don't know if people can make it for 6. That was kind of the big question. Would that be all right, or should we
Push it to 9.
push it to 9?
It's gonna go over.
will we be able to get on virtually?
We could set that up, it probably would not be ideal for the.
Yeah, and I'm hoping I'm gonna be there, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna be traveling that week or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if people can't make it, let us know, we'll set up a virtual option for sure. Is 6 o'clock okay to start for everyone?
Devin,
Yes, Don?
Devin, did I hear that the date you are keying on is December 20th?
That's correct.
Okay, I won't be there. I'll be on vacation with my grandkids.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I can go on Zoom again, but,
Yeah, okay, well, alright, we'll set it up and we'll have a virtual option so you can at least listen in. Alright.
is Phil Gore gonna be in attendance, or is he gonna be on Zoom?
He will be in attendance.
Good.
Alright, anything else on that? No, okay, we'll dive right into the budget.
You want me to share my screen?
Sure. Does anyone want a paper copy? I brought a few just in case. Yeah.
And yeah, me too, because I saw, after I looked at draft 2 this morning, you did a draft 3.
No.
No? Okay, I'm good. I got a copy.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, we are working on one, but I haven't put it anywhere. Okay. So I did share the actual budget spreadsheet in the agenda, but we have updated your fiscal year '24 budget workbook as well. So that is a running document, so we'll just keep adding to that, so all the draft 1 stuff is still at the beginning, but I did want to remind folks that the budget development timeline is right at the beginning of the budget workbook also, in case you're interested on what's coming up next. That is all being updated as well. So we skip down to like 8, I think. Okay.
Draft 2 notes?
Yes.
Draft 2 notes. All right.
Yep, so slide 8, I think, in that PowerPoint. I'm so sorry. It's okay.
I love your laptop.
I love it. So again, there's the first 2 slides on draft 2 are the notes. I'm just highlighting changes. The first change, Early Childhood Program Act 166 tuition expense has been added. That was an oversight in the last draft, and I apologize, that should have been in there and it wasn't. That, I will tell you that number. Yes, it's about 160. We have not been expending that, so if you look at prior year's expenses for the last 2 years, but we believe that we will. Because of the pandemic, there were kids that were not going off to childcare centers, and so we don't feel comfortable reducing that until we know better what. We know that there's students out there, or children out there. The employee health reimbursement account, health savings account contributions have been updated. Those are different rates for professionals, and so we've updated that. Oh, gosh, okay. ARP IDEA B and pre-K, this is another ESSER pool of money, but it's ARP IDEA B and ARP IDEA B pre-K grant. Those expenses have been moved over to ARP ESSER. That grant actually has an earlier expiration date. It was a much smaller grant. We're using that to offset some adaptive curriculum and a pre-K teacher. So we're just moving that over to the other ESSER funding source. We removed the contracted subline. I tried to put codes in there for some of these. That is the Kelly Services, contracted services for the high school that we used to use. That's no longer happening. They basically got to a point where Kelly Services wasn't able to find subs and it just wasn't working. So that's basically being done in-house at this point. So that's, all those expenses are up under the normal substitute instruction line. Blue Cross Blue Shield premium increases. The first draft we had 12%. It's actually going to be closer to 12.7. So VHI, the first proposal for that has been actually filed by VHI under 12.7. So it's looking, usually that doesn't get denied. So we're hoping that's where it ends up. We reduced the general ed CAT contract. What is CAT stand here, Julia?
Oh, now, it's been so long, it's something achievement team. It is a behavioral intervention contract with NCSS. And it comes with a person, it comes with training, it comes with a supervisor, it comes with well, it's not just a person, but it's a higher level of service than our in-house behavior interventions.
So we currently do not have any general education, so we have special ed CAP contracts with NCSS, but we do not have any general education, and we have in the past, but we've now zeroed that line out. I updated the storage unit rental contract expenses. You'll see that under facilities. You'll also see it under central office, which I forgot to note there. We are now renting one additional storage unit for central office storage because we have so much documentation that we have to keep sometimes forever if it's payroll related. And we have several for the high school. We have one for the driver's ed car. We have one for athletics. So I've increased those contract expense lines. We met with the vendor, and those have not been increased in between 5 and 10 years. So he's still giving the municipality a break, but he needed to increase them. Julie, do you want to have the next one? Increasing FTE at MVU?
Yes, so when looking at staffing, we're, I think Joanne probably knows, we've been talking about changing the schedule of the ag programming so that they meet the requirements in the schedule for career and technical education. So they have to have 120 minutes a day, 600 and something a week in order for us to get the grant that they give us. And it's been a few years since that schedule has met that criteria. We don't have a science teacher on staff with the ag program right now. So when we make those changes, and they're good changes, we have a plan in, we sent it to the state, but it requires that we have a science teacher that consults with the team and collaborates as a teacher of record in science that allows students to get that credit as a science credit. So we are in discussions about whether we are adding a half-time teacher in science. And we have a plan for that, should we go in that direction. Or whether we are looking at social studies. If you remember, Alyssa left the majority of her social studies job to be the personalized learning plan teacher. So between those two shifts, we feel like we need a 1.0 FTE. We're not entirely sure, the administration isn't entirely sure which way they're going to go. But they definitely, looks like they would need either 2 part positions or 1 position.
Okay. Next slide. Increase the general education out-of-district tuition. It was about $65,000 that we increased in that line. That's based on our current expenditures. We are, of course, still evaluating the needs or anticipated needs for next year with Tanya and Wendy and the principals, but I wanted to at least include what we're anticipating for this year. We increased the cash in lieu of health insurance that it was agreed upon in the union agreement for teachers, so I bumped that up in that. Reduced instructional, these other things in the bottom, some of these small reductions, just continuing to evaluate lines throughout the budget, smaller lines like supplies and repair and maintenance in things like instruction or guidance or student services, just anywhere that we think that we can comfortably make a small reduction to help towards the larger cause. So a lot of these things like instructional mileage, instructional supplies, copier maintenance, we're just trying to make some small adjustments as we have better information. I will say though, in some lines that's really difficult to do, and you heard me say this last year, but we still don't have a baseline year. We merged, COVID hit, we had half a school year, then we didn't have a school year, we were remote, and now we're back, but
Staffing changes.
right, and staffing shortages, so
Yeah.
we just still don't have a baseline year. So some places I'm confident enough to be able to do that and adjust things, but that's not always the case. Some things I don't want to be overly, I don't want to be too conservative. The only other thing I didn't put in the notes, which is later on, is that I did add in the MVU roof phase 1B of 1.1 million in this draft. There's some information on that later, and we'll talk about it later, but I didn't note that here in this section.
Just so you know, Rennick joined online.
Rennick joined on.
Okay.
Also, there's a variance column in the draft, there are probably some other small changes, but you can, note the variance column from draft 1 to the far right in the budget document also.
And so you decrease special ed out of district tuition?
Yes. Special ed, because, we're still evaluating that with Tanya, so I'm not sure exactly where that's going to end up, but we have some students we have some new special ed district placements that we're anticipating, but we also have some out of district placements that Tanya is evaluating because students are either not attending or there's some different circumstances, so we're hoping that.
Evaluating them closely.
Right, yeah.
So, we wanted to, and Rusty, I don't know if you can move the picture that's sort of in the way
Let's
to be
try
able
it
to see that.
like that for now.
Thank you. We wanted to go over in this drafted budget, some of our purchased professional and contracted services. Again, these are our larger buckets of contracted services, but a lot of them have initials and they're under broad headings, and so Laura and I are gonna go through them so that you understand what they are and what the purpose is. So the very first one is student support. That is general ed student support because it's a
Yes, it
1,000
is.
line? Okay. And so that includes NCSS contracts, that's Northwestern Counseling Services and Supports. There are positions that are contracted in our schools called SBBC. Those are school-based behavior consultants, and they support groups of students and build the capacity of the school to address the needs of students with significant behaviors. They are not one-on-one with kids, they may have a caseload of 10 students. We have some in Highgate, we have some in Swanson, we have one at MVU. We have 4 SBC,
School-based clinicians.
thank you, school-based clinicians. We have to double check our acronyms here, in the schools that are contracted, as opposed to hiring our own clinicians. That is a service that gets more and more demanding all the time. And we have 1 homeschool coordinator. All of those are student support, but general education. They're not tied to individual students. I'll keep going. The 1001, the next would be referee services, that's about $42,000 a year. Our audit services are $36,700. And in special education, these kinds of contracts, these are not tuition, these are contracts for tutoring services, not the transportation portion of tutoring, so that comes later. Consultants, UVM does the consultant work for all students who are deaf and hard of hearing and need audiological services. Mosaic consults with students with developmental disabilities and autism. Stern Center, I think you're aware of the language services that they provide and consult on particular teams. So those are those contracts there. Here again is the word CAT. It's gonna make me crazy that I can't remember what the C is for. But it is the inclusion services for students. It's our most intensive service that we can provide students who are able to be included in the school. And they have 2 programs. One is around behavior and one is around children with autism who also have behaviors. There are different approaches, but all under applied behavior analysis. And those would be through individual IEPs.
How many
Yes.
students do we have in that?
Number. I can't give you a number right off the top of my head, and it would be personally identifiable, but
Oh,
we manage those. Those are, again, we have to use data to make those decisions. We don't just say, oh, Peter's having a tough day, so he needs his high. It's, you go through a series of steps to get to a more restrictive level of service. And we usually use functional behavioral assessments and other kind of assessment data to make those decisions happen, if that's necessary. Psychological evaluations, we do have 3 psychologists here in the district, well, 2.6, but we also have to contract out for some evaluation services, so those are there. And then construction services,
That includes the newly added 1.1, but we had the 435 previously in there.
now, here we have tuition expenses. So we do have some students who are not on an IEP who require to be educated elsewhere outside of our scope of services. As you know, we have, as I described, the internal services and supports that we have for students. We also have an alternative program that serves some of our high school students internally. But again, we do have some students that require education outside of school. One, a small number under general education. We have our vocational tuition, which is about $324,000. And then we have our special ed placements, and you can see that number is much larger. Special ed placements, you know, if you require that level of service, it is very likely that you would have an individual education program that calls for it. And then our pre-K tuition, again, under Act 166, families can send their kids to our preschool, but they can also send their child to any pre-qualified provider anywhere. It might be where they work, it might be just next to their parents, and we have to pay a regulated amount for those 10 hours of services. Brett has a question.
No, I just wanted to tell you, I looked up under NCSS, and it says CAT means Collaborative Achievement Team.
Thank you. I knew it was achievement team, but I couldn't come up with the first. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The vocational tuition, is that all Northwestern Texas?
No, we have a student who goes to Essex, and we have a few students who go to Colt Hall. And it has to, our designated program is Northwest Career and Technical Center, but if there is a program not offered, or there's a particular plan a student is on and the match is different, that can be, you can put it in their personalized learning plan, and they can get what to do.
That being said, because there's a state share of this, there's two lines in your budget that you'll see on the first page. One is vocational tuition state share, and the other one's vocational tuition. One is our direct expense that we pay, but it's based on a prior year, because the state has a cost share in that as well. It's kind of like a flow through, and every now it actually hits our books, but we're required to report it in our stat in all of our state reporting, but this is always off by a fiscal year.
You want to talk through this? Sure.
Don has his hand
Oh,
up.
Don had his hand up. I'm sorry, Don.
Go ahead, Don.
Yes, going back to the 166 of the line item,
Yep.
is that an increase over last year, or is that the total we expect for pre-K tuition?
It's level funding the budget, because last year our actual expense for the last 2 years has been less than that, but the payment per child keeps increasing, and we know because of the pandemic, there are some children that just didn't go to childcare, potentially, so we believe that this is the correct number if all was normal, so to speak, or whatever that is.
It keeps going unstable, but
Oh. It's connection.
Yes. Yes, so we haven't had in the past few years typical enrollment in pre-qualified childcare settings. Many of them close down. Some of them, you know, some families just keep their young children at home. And the tuition amount has increased from year to year. So we think this is a pretty accurate placeholder.
You said it was a regulated price, so wherever they go, it's the same, it's costing us the same amount
So
Yes.
much per student.
wherever they go.
And then families who have their kids in that center for more than 10 hours, then they pay
Pay
the
the
rest of that
difference, yeah.
tuition. Yeah.
Okay.
But we pay those daycare or childcare facilities directly.
Right.
Our school district does.
into the Burlington area because their parents work there?
Yes, anywhere.
We do know.
It's completely portable under Act 166.
Yes, but what would an average amount be for a student that that goes out of district? I'm looking at 173,000 or close to it. That seems pretty high, unless we've got quite a few kids going.
Well, we have data on how many students, and I don't
It's
have. it here.
3,656 kids in the current, dollars in the current year per student. 3,656.
Okay, so we have a,
And that's something that we worked with Wendy on,
It's under 50 kids,
to anticipate.
to
Yeah.
anticipate.
Wendy looks at birth rates and all kinds of information to try to anticipate that, but until we have a normal year, I think I would hesitate to use that.
it seems a high dollar amount for the number of students that I'm aware of, but I'm probably not aware of most of them, but I have tried to kind of get an idea over the years how many are utilizing that option, because that was quite a challenge to get that into the legislation. I'm always curious as to, did we do a good thing? Is it being abused, or what the activity is? So, all right. Okay, I'll let that go now. I may have questions at another meeting.
So our expense in fiscal year '22 was only 85,000, almost 86,000. Last year it was only 49, but Wendy does believe, and we believe, that that's because kids were not attending childcare. The numbers seem to be there. Happy to continue to evaluate that with Wendy too, though, as we get closer.
Thank you.
So here we're just breaking out all of our lease and rental contracts. Must be tired, I can't talk tonight. Expenses. So under instructional, we have instructional buildings. We do pay a rental fee for the Connect classroom for MVU. That's $21,000 a year at the moment. Also a printer copier lease. That's with SPC. I think we renewed that last year, and that's a 5-year lease, so that's about $57,925. Dawn, you had asked me how many devices that was, and it's just under 100. It used to be higher than that, but we've done some cleaning up of some extra devices, so it's under 100 now. That does not include the maintenance costs, so we do pay about $25,000 a year for maintenance as well. That's just for the devices themselves. Technology equipment under instruction, the 1001 fund. These are devices for students and staff. That's typically a lease, which is why it's under a 443 object code. That's about $50,000 or $49,395. You will notice at the bottom of this chart, I currently have the other half of the technology under ESSER. So I have another $46,265. That's a prime example of a budget line that we are continuing to incorporate into the drafts of the budget, but we are offsetting things with ESSER funds as much as possible. Actually, in the current year, we're using emergency connectivity funds also because there was a grant announced that we could use for that purpose, so we try to take advantage of those. But we're not eliminating the lines in the general fund because strategically, how do we get that funding back in once those grants go away, which we know they will. Under plant operations and buildings, we have storage units. Those are the ones that I was talking about earlier. That's just MVU's piece. That's $7,630 at the moment. Plant operations and equipment. This is our equipment leases or borrowings for tractors, snow blowers, mowers, attachments. Similar to the conversation we just had about the Swanton new compact tractor that we're purchasing. Right now, we have a lease built in, or lease payment built in for $40,100. I believe we can probably start to reduce that some because the last 2 tractors that we purchased, because of ESSER, we've freed up enough revenue that we could purchase them outright. So even if we were leasing 2 tractors a year on average, which would mean purchasing one next year, probably for MVU, and then the next year, and having 2 revolving at a time, it probably would be closer to maybe $30,000 thousand, but I'm not quite ready to reduce it, so right now I left it what it was level funded with we'll continue to work through that with the task force. Instructional buildings, that's the ice rink, rental for MVU hockey, that's $36,050 a year. Again, if you look at actuals, that's another place where the actuals are actually a bit lower, but during the pandemic, we weren't having all the games. And so, this is more typical or more reflective of a typical year. Interscholastic other, so that's portalettes and golf rental car that we use to get them to and from the country club, that's $6,270. Then we have our central office building storage units, there's 2 of them, that's $2,088 a year. Central office, that's our central office lease, that will be $41,200. And then I already spoke about the technology ESSER piece for student and staff devices.
Laura,
Mm-hmm. Yes, Don?
is the golf cart rental for the coach?
It's a car, it's actually a smaller van.
Oh, okay, so that takes the team to its meets, or?
Yes.
Yes, and to practice at the club.
Yes, less expensive than busing, because it's a small amount of students, but yes, the first time I saw that, I thought it meant the golf cart that
We own
we
that.
We own that.
I know our golf coach fairly well, and I thought if we had to have a cart for him, I would.
Yeah.
Okay. Has the ice rink rental money, I know I have a budget, but I'm not where I can look at it right now, but has that cost gone up much in recent years? Because their expenses must be going up with the cost of fuel and maintenance.
I have not been made aware of an increase to that expense passing down to us. That's a discussion I can have with John, but as I was saying, the actuals have actually been less the last 2 years because of the pandemic and the games not all happening.
Right.
So again, once we have a typical year. But I've not been made aware of another, John will be submitting his department budget in the next month. So I'll have more accurate numbers in regards to that.
Ready?
And then-
Transportation.
So here I'm just breaking down your transportation contract expenses. As we know, those are fairly significant lines as well. So the first one is your to and from school. For students, that's about 1.6 million. We have our tech center to and from, that's 42,000, not $42. We have athletics for MVU sports, 54,568. Again, that's a line, if you look at actuals, it will be lower for the same reasons, but this is more typical of more accurate of a typical year. Other, we have out-of-district placements, so when students go out of district, it's about $7,000, almost $8,000 a year now for transportation to get them to a place out of district. This is also for field trips and sometimes homeless transportation, it depends. Other small pieces of transportation, that's about $118,000. And we have the
What's
special.
the out of district?
Out of district, again, is students who have to go to either SOAR school or Laraway school or another placement, and so we have to pay transportation to and from as well.
A SOAR contract is about $8,000 a student for transportation to and from.
Some schools are farther away, so that costs even more. And then the after-school program and summer, the local portion.
And that's a portion that we're currently investigating, after-school program. They just, with so many grants, I can't even tell you, like every day, which is good, but, so we have, there's a new ARP ESSER after-school program and summer grant that is available to us right now. Marnie and I just attended a webinar. We think that we could potentially fund transportation and the subsidy for the after-school program snacks and meals that we're having to provide right now because we lost our area eligibility, which was how we were paying for them before. They were actually all free. And so I may be able to reduce this line at least for the next couple of years. I guess more to come on that, but I don't believe that she would currently be needing this. That being said, there's a Medicaid offset on the revenue side for this, so the revenue would go down on the net ed spending side. So it would be a decrease to your budget, but you would also lose the revenue on the net ed spending side.
When you say reduce the, you're talking about after-school summer programs, when you say reduce, you're meaning that it's being offset with grant money?
It is, we're currently using, so there's a local expense for the local share that's required for after-school and summer programming, but on the revenue side, we're using Medicaid dollars to fund that local support at the moment. So if I reduce the expense, I'd have to reduce the Medicaid revenue on the revenue side too, or use that Medicaid for something else that's in the budget, which is a potential
I just
also.
want to be clear, because I mean, the discussions we've had, we realize how important the after-school programs, summer programs are to keep our
Yeah.
students.
We just, at the moment, have several different revenue sources that are available to us for that programming. And so we're trying to utilize them as efficiently as possible.
Great.
So when's the cliff gonna happen on that program? I mean, you look at it, it appears that at some point, some of the other funding streams aren't going to be in existence. Have we given any thought to how that may play out over the next 2 or 3 years?
That's all Laura thinks about. Yeah.
And I bother Julie with it all the time.
That's okay. No, just in terms of the 21C grant, that is the largest revenue source for our after-school and summer programming. That is dependent on enrollment. I think that as our ESSER or other revenue sources fade out, that will be around the time that we'll be reapplying for 21C, and we make sure that it is right-sized, right, according to the enrollment and the need. But we've always supported our after-school and programming with Medicaid funds and other grants as we're able to get them. So it's a bit of a shell game, making sure that, we use up the most appropriate grant for the source. And then we always think about, well, once that dries up, then what is the next most appropriate source for that?
Specifically here, Dawn, is part of the reason that we have been, some of the other things that we used to support with Medicaid dollars, I'm actually funding with ESSER dollars or different sources right now because they are available. Because Medicaid is so flexible and you can carry it over, it doesn't go away at the end of a fiscal year. It's probably the most flexible funding source that we have. So over the last couple of years, you've probably heard me mention, I haven't been utilizing as much of that revenue. I'm kind of letting it sit there because I know the cliff is going to happen and it is flexible and we will have it at the end. And I can apply it in ways that we need. So I think I've mentioned that a few times, but that's one example. Also, we are continuously looking, and even more so now, at how we utilize our title dollars or our CFP dollars, and thinking about maybe transitioning that to maximize and help us with the funding cliff as well, and absorbing some of the costs that we do want to continue into the general fund. So yes, constantly we are having those conversations at the office. Doesn't mean there won't be a cliff, but we're trying.
I'm glad to hear. No, I'm glad to hear that, because I think Swanton may have been one of the first schools in the state to put local money in. I remember when Jack McCarthy raised the issue.
Yep.
And I think we've had good programs, and I wouldn't want to be in a position all of a sudden that we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars that we got to go local unless we know in advance so we can start phasing increases in. So, okay, as long as we have a strategy or a plan that we don't have to start cutting that program.
Yes, because those are really important, particularly around engagement of students, community support, but also the tutoring that happens in those programs in a lot of cases. So it really helps with student outcomes on a number of levels.
And then this is just a piece of information because it's every year this is a large topic when we talk about budgets and unintended consequences, maybe intended consequences, I don't know, but something I feel like people sometimes forget about. In next year, we have $185,630 included in this budget, which is the healthcare subsidy to the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System per new educator. That number will continue, as I've said before, to continue to increase every year because you continue to pay on them basically forever. And so when we're a school district that turns over 40 staff a year, if any of those are new teachers to the system, you're gonna start paying $1,440 per teacher per year, which that amount goes up every single year, started at like 1,100 or a little under 1,200. And so this dollar amount will continue to grow in your general fund and you have no control over it. So I just like to remind, I mean, it's a lot of money, it's $186,000, so I think it's important to remind you of that. Also, not a general fund or budget consideration, but we did, again, take a look at also this subsidy, which is over 20% now for any federally funded teachers. And that there's a subsidy, and that number now out of our CFP or Title I dollars is over $200,000. So that is another reason that we are evaluating what we utilize our title dollars on, because we currently use it for staff, because you avoid things like procurement and all of this giant process that we have to follow and administrative burden. But thinking about that amount of money that comes off the top that we no longer can access because it's going to this cause, it's another reason to evaluate how we're using the CFP. Now that those positions are in our general fund as expenses, so we wouldn't lose the positions. So just information.
I'm not sure I really understand that.
Okay.
That's okay, but what
No.
I'm interested in more is, you mentioned because we have, if I got it right, because we have a higher turnover, it
Mhm.
hurts us more.
Yes.
So to me, that sounds like it's hurting some school districts more than others
Absolutely.
inequitably.
It does, and I think that's the unintended consequence that probably no one
Right,
thought
so,
about.
so I would think from a board perspective, that would be kind of an interesting conversation to have. I'm assuming this has something to do with our legislature.
Yes, it was, oh gosh, maybe 10 years ago, this law was passed as a way to
Right.
supplement the teacher retirement.
So I
system.
would suspect this is really hurting the most vulnerable
Yes, it is.
communities,
Mhm.
districts,
Right, if you have a school, you know,
with a higher turnover, right.
right.
So I think from a board level, I think that's on our list of possible things we should bring up with our legislators. Cause that concerns me if it's hurting our district disproportionately from, say, the wealthier districts who don't probably have the turnover the less wealthy districts have.
It was another example of a way to shift the funding into the ed fund outside of other areas of the state budget.
Yeah, I don't know what the fix is, but I would think that they could do,
Nor do
there's
I,
a better
but
way
it's
to do it
important to
more,
point out.
do more equitably.
Yes.
They could take it out of the ed fund directly.
Exactly.
Instead, it comes down to us, and it looks like an expense that we have, and it's not our, it theoretically is not our expense.
It's a promise the state made that they were gonna pay teachers' retirement, and then they passed it on down to us. I'm still angry about it from 10 years ago.
Which, that's an argument for a different place
Yeah.
probably, but the fact that it looks like an expense that MVSD has control over is the part that makes me uncomfortable, because that line will continue to grow every year, and we have no control over, is it $1,400, is it $2,400, is it $4,000, and it just continues to grow every year. So that's the part that makes me a little concerned, or a lot concerned. Before we get into the roof, with the roof, I guess we'll talk about that later. We're up to 9.86% increase to the expenditure budget in this draft. I do wanna share with you some, if you think that's appropriate.
I do, just don't name school districts.
Yeah, some preliminary information. I work with VASBO now quite on a pretty high level,
When
and
you're the president.
I am. And so we're gathering some preliminary expenditure, budget, and net ed spending information based on where people are with their drafts right now across the state. And I've received 9 responses that the survey just went out today, but it's 15%, this is expenditure budget, 15%, 12.8, 5.5, 7, 8, 5.2, 10, 13. And then if we think about ed spending, it's 14, 16, 6, 8, 8, 4, 10. So there are a lot of people that are up there in the higher ranges. There's some other information that we're collecting in this survey that we hope that VASBO and the Vermont Superintendent's Association can pass along to boards and the community, rather than just coming from school districts alone. Kind of outlining all the factors that are causing these larger increases from an expenditure perspective, so we know that, you know, people are trying to pay people more. Not only what's being negotiated for teachers, but also all the support staff, custodians, everything, so that's a statewide increase. The health insurance increase, you know, I do remember that was like $600,000 for us, so, you know, when you're pushing the 12%, that's a lot. Facility and capital needs, so we are collecting that information on a state level to hope that it'll help us all when we're trying to explain these increases to taxpayers. So more information to come on that, but I thought it was important to share.
I think it's also important, when we just went through all these contracts are also often represent people. And so those staffing costs for NCSS and other of our vendors also are going up. There isn't an out-of-district tuition cost that has gone down. All of those costs are going up because of all of the prices and inflation pressures that are on every aspect of business. So it's not just our own staffing, it's also in contracts as well.
And I think the other big thing is, it is the funding cliff, it's the expiration of the ESSER funds that people are trying to plan and be strategic about. That is a statewide, 55% of the people that have answered so far have said that that's a consideration and added a cost to this year's budget, because things that you wanna keep, you're gonna lose funding for, even if it's not everything, you're gonna adjust what you can, but overall, you know, we're all concerned about the lack of that funding source that we will have had for 3 years. The other thing that we're trying to work on is the language, the article language. So where it says that if that percentage increase to spending for equalized pupil, that has sometimes been not helpful for us or any other school districts, or many other school districts, I should say. We're doing a poll about that language, because currently that is going to cease to be required statutory language, but that got pushed back to fiscal year 25's budget. So for this current year, we are going to have to continue to use that. And again, it hasn't been beneficial to us. So we're looking to see if we can gather enough information to lobby with legislature as early as possible in January to see if there's anything that they will do to work with us on that. So I just wanted to make you aware that that was something else that we're trying to do.
Or when in our timeline will we be looking at, because the expenditure budget is an important number, but it's really not the number that our taxes or spending for equalized people is based on. That's our net ed spending. So when do you think we'll be looking at that?
I would say probably I already am,
Right.
based on information we have. We have a few revenues, like the special ed block grant revenue, like we know what some of those revenues are going to be, those have been announced. But at the next meeting, I will give you some preliminary information about that. Again, at VASBO last Friday, Brad James shared with us that he has no idea if we will receive the equalized pupils. Actually, he basically said we won't receive them by the statutory deadline of the 15th, that it probably will be more so in January, he hopes, because there's still issues with data. So
I don't understand how we can present the budget to the voters with statutorily required language if they don't give us equalized pupil numbers that are required in order to create that language at a January board meeting. Just saying it on camera.
And because I am the VASBO president now, I feel more comfortable having those conversations with the AOE and pushing a little harder with Bill Bates and people that may have, but it doesn't seem to help. But hopefully we'll have some preliminary numbers. But if you remember last year, they kept changing when we thought they were pretty much frozen. That equalized pupil number kept changing. I did hear that on a very preliminary level, hopefully the yield will benefit us this year, but with things like universal meals being considered, you know, for kids, that's got a $40 million or whatever the price tag is. That was an estimate last year coming out of the ed fund. There's big ticket items and no one knows how they're going to handle those yet. So, you know, I'm still pessimistic, which is just me by nature. It's because I've been burned. But next month, we can talk more. I'll give you the information that we have. Quick numbers right now, not to scare anyone, but because of the increase to the budget, if everything was to remain consistent, we'd be at like 17 cents. That's before CLA. But again, we're only in draft 2, it's early. I believe equalized pupil numbers will go up, hopefully the yield will help us, so, but that's where we are right now.
Thanks, Laura. How do we wanna do this next piece? Do we wanna watch we're gonna talk about the MVU roof project and many phases. Do we wanna watch the video first? Or,
Alright, let me stop sharing this.
does anyone wanna introduce the video facilities committee?
It'll speak for itself.
Alright.
I will just say that JR in our office is doing some amazing things. This is just one of them, but he is helping with all different departments, and he's wonderful to work with.
High quality stuff.
It's really great, yeah.
So this is something we hope to get out to the public and get as many eyeballs on as possible to see the work that's been done over the last year or two.
Before you play it, this is not the same as the one that's out with the survey that was posted on that, or is it the same?
It's different. This video
It's
is
just
one
on the
you
roof.
saw in the facilities
Right,
committee.
just on the roof.
It's
No,
not,
it's
this is
not.
not just the roof, this is the activity that's happened in all our school buildings.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
I've already received a lot of positive feedback about the clip that's on with the survey.
Yes.
People, and it's from people out of district who see it, and they're like, good job on that video.
Nice.
And I'm like, I had nothing to do with it, but it
But
is
you
pretty,
supported.
it is pretty slick.
It is pretty
So,
good, right?
and I think they'd probably be even more impressed that we're not paying someone to do, well, we are paying, but it's in-house.
It's
We're not
in-house.
like
Right.
contracting out this to be done.
He has a recording studio.
Right, we're lucky.
But, sorry.
He also did did anyone see the psychology?
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
that too.
That was
Yeah.
cool, I
That
thought
was
that was
really good.
wonderful,
It was.
yeah.
It's professional.
It's very, yes.
So, I will hit play and we'll see if this works.
Just worry about your sound. There we go.
With the buzz, yeah.
It's worse with my kid.
I think it might be some feedback.
Oh, it's feedback?
Yeah.
That's good.
Now, pay attention to the roof lines.
good stuff. I know, a year ago, we had the survey come back for the budget and people were interested in prioritizing facility upkeep. And so, this is I think a really nice way to now show folks what, those additional funds that they approved in the budget, as well as some ESSER grant funds have produced for us, so. Very nice.
So that, I guess I'm getting the two confused. That one's not out for people to see yet?
It is, I
Oh,
think it was put on the website. We also added a tab in the information that has all our facility assessments on
Okay.
it.
Alright.
And I am thinking that we should put the video there.
Anywhere, like,
Oh.
I saw
I
the
think it might
one
be
with the
in-
survey, which is not that one, but that one would be good for me to share with
You
people.
look it up, and we'll see it.
If it's on the website, I can find it.
So under our website, under information now, there's a facilities tab, it's the second tab, and that's where you can find, some great photos too. He has our assessments, and he's also linking, minutes and agendas, and yes, it's right there as you scroll down.
Okay, great.
Facilities,
Yeah.
Is it also on each individual school website, by any chance?
That I
no.
don't know.
At this point, we don't have them all linked under one management system. So we could have the other schools have a link to this page. So that,
I think that'd be a good idea, if people want their samples.
Alright, so that is our segue into the specific project we want to talk about, which is the MVU roof replacement.
we'll go back to that. Presentation.
It might be better to go right to it. Well, there's only 10 minutes right now.
Is that what you want?
Well, I think Peter is going to take the lead on this.
Yes.
Alright,
Do you need to make it bigger, Peter?
sure.
I was just hoping you might say no.
Why? Oh, she was hoping.
Yeah.
Where?
I never say that. Alright. So, the video already ruined the surprise. I was going to tell everybody you didn't realize the colors of the roof. But obviously those aren't the colors, so. So this is something that we've been looking at, and last year we actually finished off, I believe that's ABC, so Pod C was done last year. So we identified the MVU roof as an issue. Been working with Jason, more, so we get a better understanding why the roof needs replacing, the work that it needs. So the roof is over 25 years old. It's approximately 136,600 square feet of roof. So there was a recoat done in 2011, and there was a 10-year warranty on that, so that was in August 2011, so that expired in August in 2021. So where are we at right now? We have, except for the one we just replaced, we have lots of leaks. His team is estimating they have between 20 and 25 leaks in the roof. And they're spread out all over, but Pod B, it's in the middle there, is a particular problem area where there are several leaks. And he's saying the issue with a flat roof and these leaks is you can never pinpoint where the leaks are, and you end up having a lot of tiles and stuff spoiled because they're, it's just running, and they're finding, the spots, and if it's really raining, they have to put buckets out. So it's obviously a major issue. The new roof, we're given a 20-year warranty on. So we have that one that's done there. So where do we go from here? So we've talked about this in the past as a board, is trying to, obviously this is several pods, this is a big chunk, you can see dollar amounts there. We decided we'll do it each year, we'll do a pod and move on. The reason we started here with C and now we're going to B and then we have to go to A is because we can't get to the real problem area until we have those done, because that roof is lower than these roofs are. So we have to do these before we can do that. So the longer we put it off, the longer it takes us to get to the problem. So we know what the problem is. We know approximately how much it's going to cost to fix a problem. So how do we pay for it? How do we go about this? As you saw, we asked Laura, the facilities committee, to put it in the budget to see what it'll look like, to see the numbers, to get a real view of it. The reason we'll go back to the issues of the budget. Obviously, one of them we put in the budget. That means that there's other things, right, that we can't do. Even facilities-wise, we can't do maybe all the projects. We've got a lot of projects we need done. We put this in the budget. It restricts some of those projects, and it may not just facilities, other things that we want because we're putting this in there. But there's other options. We could do a line item. We could go to the voters and have a separate line item and say we're going to ask for 1.1 million for the roof, so they could have they'll have a budget and then they'll have a line item. The issue with that is timing. We really need to get going on this, like I said, because we can't get it done. We can't get to the real problem area until we get these others done. If we put on a line item, we have to have a contract in December if we want to have any chance of doing this summer. If we put a line item, we don't know if it's going to pass. So we can't really commit. So that puts it out a whole nother year. So that's an issue. Can we pass our main budget and a roof project side by side? Don't know, but it's another complication. So those are some of the issues there. We could do a bond. Probably not a great time to do bonding because interest rates are going up. So money's gonna cost more if we have to borrow it.
That would take a lot more time too, next year.
Exactly. And we're not gonna bond for one pod, right? We're gonna bond for the whole thing, so the dollar value is gonna go way up. And as we discussed in the facilities room, if we bond for this, I don't know how many years we would go out, but we're not gonna get another bond in that time period, right? So we're putting everything into here, and we can't, we'll be tying our hands for the future. So that was the main reason we didn't want to go that way. And then, if we really wanted to, we didn't want to put up with all this, we'd build a new school. What's the price tag on that? We looked at, in the beginning, when EEI came on, they did a plan, and it didn't even do the whole school. It eliminated these pods here, and they had a price tag around $30 million, which I can tell you is not real. As you'll see when we talk about the Franklin project, everything with inflation is going way up, so that's probably not even a real number. And we still have these other pods. So that's why in the end we came back to wanting to put that 1.1 million in our 2024 budget with the plan to go forward contracting in December so we can get this next pod, which is pod D, done this summer so we can continue on with the work and get this project completed. It's a slow moving project, as you can see, but The longer it takes us to get to each one, the more expense, the more wear and tear on the roof is gonna just get more expensive as we go. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're looking at.
So we're not looking for any decision tonight, there's no vote or anything, but, we will open up for discussion if any members have initial thoughts. Certainly be coming back to it a few times, between now and then.
December, actually.
Okay, so discussion or no discussion?
Yeah, yep.
We're okay
discussion.
tonight
Yep.
for discussion?
Yep, sure.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I don't know, I'll support, the next pod, that's my personal opinion. My fear is, as we go down the line, the numbers do seem to get a little bit bigger, except for like phase 3. So I don't know, do we have a 5-year plan, or we're just really gonna take it a year at a time? Like, I already, we're at 9.3, whatever the increase was roughly.
Almost 10.
Okay, so 10. Just with, the increases, just salaries, like we're trying to retain, our staff. So, and that's just gonna be, that's an ongoing thing. And then to see our projects that's on paper, that's not talking about projects that we are not aware of that might just pop up. So, for the next budget, I'm gonna be in support of it, that's fine. But because you presented it and it's on the board, when we look at 28, 3.7, and that's today's number. Is that gonna be the number in the year 2027? Probably not. Or,
Well, right now, I don't want to speak out of turn, but right now it's pretty bad as far as pricing for any construction projects. So
Right.
what happens to that? I don't have a magic ball, but I would hope that maybe it would get better, but I'm probably being optimistic
no,
there, but.
I don't think it's gonna be
But
better.
you, at the end of this year, with the 1.1 million and with the other capital money that's already in there, you're almost up to 1.6 in that line. So I don't think the
Right.
idea is to remove it. It would be that you would continue
But
down that path.
So in
Yeah,
next year.
and that's,
yeah.
and I agree with that, but so, in my Franklin math, we have a $500,000 that we just kind of keep in there. So the 1.6 is the roof plus the $500,000 that's for odds and ends, let's say, basically.
Other smaller
Other
capital.
capital.
Smaller,
projects.
yeah, smaller
Right.
items, so I think that $500,000 will always be there on top of the next pod that needs
Mhm.
to be done.
That's really the hope, because we
So-
also, if you think about the Swanton assessment that we had, there are also other projects after the roof is done.
Yeah.
And we're slowly increasing so that we can get to those numbers. Then we would have it's not about, we wouldn't be increasing with large numbers. So we would have a capital line that could then move on to potentially a different project. So that's a possibility, once we get this roof taken care of. The challenge is, this is a project that we can do in a phased way, where some projects, you can't phase it in, right? So, it seems like a practical way to attack a very large problem. And it's somewhat unique because MVU has a very different structure. The roof material was very,
Bad.
I'm searching for a vocabulary
You can use
word.
that word.
Was not something that contractors would be choosing now. It's not easy
Yeah,
to
but
replace.
it's 50 years
not-
old.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're own home in 50 years, you're gonna replace that roof. At 25 years, you're gonna
And
replace the
unfortunately,
roof. So it's
these are
just,
round pods.
right,
So
just
you
nothing is
can't,
easy.
can't put standing seam on a round pod,
Which
like
is probably
that's.
a good thing, though. That's what
But the
I
other,
think.
I think the other really important part to your point, Joanne, also, which I keep talking about with the task force too, is investigating all the revenue sources, thinking about different ways to fund capital projects. None of them are magic, right? But there are possibilities. There are separate article lines that you could go to voters for. There is bonding, that is a potential thing. We're looking at performance contract, continue to look at performance contracting, hopefully getting a lighting, budget neutral project to get all new lighting in some of our buildings. Is it a line item, a capital line? But I think, is it a lease? Is it short-term leases under 15 years where we get some of these other projects crossed off the list and with the lease payment, so you don't have to take all the time to have a formalized bond process, but you can borrow money under a lease to do.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of looking at all of those
Because-
revenues and figuring out strategically how to use them the best. And on top of that, I'll tell you that the AOE is also, I mean, I'm pessimistic about this, but, I know. But there's $2 million of our BESSER dollars at the state level being set aside right now to do assessments at the state level of all the buildings. We just got a memo that said that they're going to be assessing all of our buildings. Do I agree with that or not agree with that? A lot of us already have assessments, so I'm not sure I agree with that. But that's what they're doing, and then in hopes that that will help them lobby to get us more money. Is construction aid coming back? I have no idea, but the state is, this is on their radar. Will there be more grant funding or some other revenue sources out there? Maybe, I don't know. But we do, our district, other districts, we continue to look at all the grant opportunities too. There was 2 HVAC grants that we just submitted for again. So we are looking at those revenue sources too, but I think it's really gonna take all of them.
Devin Rennick, I know you can't see, but Rennick has his hand up.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Ren.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, pardon me for not knowing the answer to this, but was ESSER funding considered for part of this roof, or was there a reason it couldn't be, it wouldn't work? I feel like I should know the answer to this, but I wanted to ask.
No, it's a good question, it's an important question. It's not a project that is the kind of project they were approving for our BESSER funding. HVAC, they were, it was not one of the things that they were approving or encouraging us. Because yes, it's certainly something we would have at least considered. Also, they needed us to do something completely within the funding source. And all the pods, we couldn't say we were done with it. And we couldn't tie it to COVID. Those are the 2 main reasons.
Okay, all right, thanks.
You're welcome. Are you okay?
So, Joanne, kind of on the same line of thinking you were having there, I could imagine a scenario where we have this in our operating budget for a few years, and then a future board might say,
Yeah.
Rates are better, let's look at all our projects and do a bond for phases 4, 5, and
Yeah.
these other 3 things at different schools, or even at some point in the future, a board saying, let's do a separate article for this 2 million or 3.7, so I agree with you. I don't know what the future holds for, 5 years from now.
Yeah, I'm, without being pessimistic. Let's say we make it through 24 and the budget will pass at some point. But then, we get stuck on 25 because that number it's a little bit bigger and increases, everything's just gonna be more, and then that one's more of a challenge to pass. It's just, that's gonna be a harder, because if we're in the same situation next year in December, and we're approving the 1.6 for the 8 pod, when March rolls around.
Right, so another thought I'll just float out there, I don't know if I support this thought or not. Once a number is in the budget, if we can pass a budget with a phase of the roof in there, then it's in, right? We had the 1 million in last year already, right? Or
435.
435, okay.
Because it's
So once it's in there, then year after year, our increase, our tax increase, our spending increase isn't very much, right? So the heaviest lift is the first year we get it in the budget. It's gonna add almost 3% this year. So if we, yeah, we got the cliff coming too. Is there another $500,000 worth of facility needs? 'Cause, I mean, my sense is 435 that we budgeted is not nearly enough. Do we go for a 1.6 million in this year and plan for that in the year after, where we just don't have, kind of slow down on facilities, and then 1.6 again in phase 3, and just plan on a 1.6 number for the next 3 years to cover roof and everything else, and kind of smooth that out. So again, it's the hurdles year 1, for sure, and we need community buy-in on the long-term plan, not just a year 1. But, I don't know, so that's the thought, just to,
Instead of the up and down.
instead of the up and down, and maybe address some of those other needs we know are out there. Facilities group, if you have a list already of
Oh, yeah.
what you do, yeah.
And I would just be careful with the language, because I don't think it wouldn't address all, but it would definitely cross some bigger things off the list with, if you're talking about another 500,000 on top of the.
So, another thing to ponder, we have a couple more meetings here before we have a decision.
We need to decide for the,
With the roof, we need to sign a contract in December if we're gonna commit to the roof next phase, because they need to secure the contractors and the materials and so forth. And the lead time on that is extensive. So,
The amount you put in the budget, you
That
have
could
until
shift.
probably second week of January when you finalize, really, to consider that number.
We do need to realize the risk we take with signing that agreement. Because if we sign $1.1 million away, and then we put this in the budget and the budget fails, and we need to take $1.1 million out, it's not from this, the contract signed. And that's gonna be a challenge, so.
I do think though it is something that everybody can clearly understand, right? That the board is being fiscally responsible and doing it in a phased approach and taking care of their facilities. And you can say, this percentage or this dollar amount is due to this phase. And, it's a concrete thing that people can point to. And the board has worked, and the committee has worked really hard in examining options. And it's one of the most important things the board and the budget does is support our facilities.
We'd really like to keep the ball rolling. We started last year, but, I mean, you're absolutely right. It is a risk. And Don certainly would not want to do this, but Don did bring up a point, but it sounded like it's like 3 tractor trailers worth of materials that we'd have to store, and we would obviously have to pay for it. We certainly don't want to do that, but I guess if we had to cut. But ideally, what you're saying is correct. If we're gonna cut, we're gonna have to cut somewhere else.
Don does have his hand.
And Don?
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit, then I do want to comment on the discussion. Laura, when I saw the number about 4 slides ago, there was more than 1.1 million. Did I miss the discussion on what those others would be? What was the total amount being asked for on MVU roof and capital?
We have an existing line that has 435,000 in it. That's been, we've added $100,000 every year to that line for a few years now, which has got us up to the 435. So we just added the 1.1 million to that.
Okay, but have we identified projects anywhere along the way that we might use it for?
Well, we have the long-term plan that we've been developing, that we've been sharing with the task force the last couple of meetings, so prioritizing that would be the next. I think the roof is
So
kind
the
of
next
put
step-
that on hold.
All right.
Right, so,
Okay.
But yeah,
Okay, no, okay, I just want to make sure because, word will be getting out on this. And it was my understanding that we weren't at the priority stage yet. That we've been putting number in the budget and then the appropriate time.
the 435, if you added the additional 1.1 or 1.6 or whatever, the 435 would still be there to prioritize other projects that are part of the capital plan that's been shared.
then we certainly could drop back. Because right now, our current budget, we are not increasing our current budget for capital by putting in 1.1, right?
We are.
This is not, there's not an additional amount, it's level funding.
No,
Uh,
no,
So I just think that, and I know we need to make a decision, in fact, I thought we might even be making it tonight until I got the agenda, but I think there's some merit in asking for a higher number, which if we didn't need on the roof, then maybe could carry forward, or there may be some other projects we can get off the table.
Right.
So it's something to think about. I certainly would support 1.1. I thought Peter did a great job explaining the process that facilities is used to arrive there. But increasing it might not be a bad idea.
so just, I think maybe where some people might be confused, the phase 1A, the $1,085,000, that was not a line item in the budget. That was money that was freed up because we utilized ESSER for other things that we ended up with a surplus at the end of last year, and then going into this year, also, we used some of this year's money already to pay for that. So it came from general fund dollars from fiscal year 22 and 23, that was, and those general dollars were created by utilizing ESSER for other purposes, but it was not an actual line item in the budget. For 1B, going into 24, we're looking to add the 1.1 on top of the 435 that's already there for phase 1B, if that's more clear.
Okay, thank you. I know we've discussed this, but to be honest with you,
Yeah.
I thought it did have an impact on the general fund, but it didn't have. So it is a new one.
General fund, yes, budget, no.
All right. Thanks, Don. Any other discussion on the roof project at the moment?
I'll take my hand now.
It is down.
Thanks, Don.
I'm not sure if I'm in favor of going for the higher amount than adding the 1.1. Just because we think it'll make it easier the following year.
It would also allow you strategically a place to cut if you need it.
Yes, but I don't know, I'm trying to look at it as simply as possible.
Right.
So we need $100 this year.
$1 million.
Oh, say we need it, but I'm gonna say 100.
Okay.
Because
That sounds better.
I can come up with it. I can come up with 100.
Okay.
So we need $100. But we know next year then we need 120. And our thinking is, well, we'll pay 120 next year, or this year, so it'll just feel like, I'd rather pay 100 this year and pay an extra 20 next year instead of paying an extra 40.
Right, so the question is, I think it comes down to looking at that long-term plan that you guys have, to see if we have some critical items that would be good to take care of next year. Because you're right, we're not asking for that extra $20 just to have $20 to smooth it out, like, you know, and we wouldn't do it if there wasn't a critical need. So, you know, I think that's probably the question to throw back to the task force, is you look at that, do you have, are there more things we should look at?
What do we really, what, if we get that, what critical things do we need to do, and can we put them off or can we not put them off?
Yeah, and if the answer
What
is,
is that number supposed to be? You know,
Right.
What will it be in the end on those criticals?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking 20, but maybe it's 40.
Yeah, there's a lot of things on the list, and facility directors are chomping at the bit on a lot of them, because we've been crossing emergency items off the list, things like HVAC, trying to keep our buildings clean, and air quality, or, you know, asbestos abatement, or kitchen renovations, as we have different funding sources. But there's a lot on that list that has been on the list for 5+ years now.
And I can make sure, there's a shared drive for facility committees, and I can make sure all the board members have access to that. It's something we had put together for the committee, but when we're talking about you know, all of the things, you should be able to go in and see it whenever you.
I can link that in the workbook too.
Yeah.
And the reason, if my memory serves me, we were trying to increase that capital line, the 435 that Laura mentioned was lower than that, was 335. And we've been trying to ramp that up because we know our routine annual need is higher than that anyway, so could we just step it up to what it really needs to be sustainable in the next year? So, I don't know, that, like I said, that's just the thought for all of us to carry
Just
around.
another thing to mention too is other school districts are using this as a strategy now, and that is somewhat new. Everyone used to go for bonding or a separate article, but Maple Run, for instance, other school districts are utilizing a capital project line as a general fund line now and incorporating that into their budget because they have so many needs, just like we do. So it's more typical, I guess I would say, than it used to be as a strategy.
So
Yeah, I mean-
I've been thinking about this a lot because especially what's happened in a neighboring district in Franklin County with their bond that they just went out to. It's a very interesting thought process of like, I'd like to be able to say, and I can't, but I'd like to be able to say that just stick with us, stick with our path the board is plowing here, because we want to deliver you minimal increases every year. Most people can be okay with that, or we can defer, put things off, but at some point we have a legal responsibility to keep a roof over our kids that attend our schools, and we could end up like a neighboring district that just had to go out to bond, and now I would say a majority of the homeowners are now looking at $300 a year increase for the next 30 years.
And it took them 3 years to pass that.
Yeah, right. So I don't know if I ever want to have to go that route. So, but I'd like to be able to say, let's do it this way, and we can tell you that there's going to be increases, but they're going to be minimal, and we won't ever have to hit you with a 30-year, $300 a year increase just for those projects. But you can't really make that promise to
Yeah,
taxpayers.
that's the thing, yeah.
That's where it gets difficult.
But it's part of a multi-pronged strategy to get at all the many things that,
And
Really good point.
this is what we need to do. We're being open and honest.
Yeah.
We're being upfront with the public. These are our needs, and we're trying to fix these issues with the best way possible, with the least amount of pain to the taxpayers that we can, knowing that it is going to be a burden. But we have responsibilities to keep the district, schools functioning in a healthy and we don't want the buildings falling down around us. So.
Thanks, Peter.
yes.
And task force, thanks for that, all the work on that. That's great. For now, we've got the 1.1 in that budget draft, so just remember that as you're looking at those numbers. Alright, next item on here is contracted services.
Which is what we
which
did
already
in-
looked
yep.
through.
The- All I have for budget survey, Devin, I linked the video, it sounds like a lot of people saw it already. And I wanted to let you know that it went out, that I sent it to all families, I contacted the select boards, or town clerk in each town. Swanton said they don't have an email list. Highgate pushed it out with their email list. I haven't heard from Franklin, but we already have, just under 100 folks that have responded to that survey, so that's pretty good. I did a separate one for employees, because I thought it was important to have their voice, but it's completely same questions, side-by-side survey. So we'll have that information too, to see if there's, and I did ask people, do you work for us and live in town? So there's so far about a third of those folks have that. So that went out, and we'll look at that in December.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the budget discussion. Any other last parting thoughts on this?
The budget survey, I haven't seen yet. Did we ask the question if people would like a mail ballot or not? Did we ask that question? I'm just curious what the public,
That wasn't a survey question.
okay.
We did reach out to the 3 select board chairs, and I only heard from one now. And Devin, nobody, the question was for them to reach out to you.
Yeah, so that's, there's, that timeline's kinda short.
It
Right,
is.
so what was the plan? If, let me think about this, so our non-elected administrators reached out. Do we have a, like, how, do you all, were you gonna just stop, or I'm just trying to find out what, like,
Well, I was following the direction that I was taking
Right.
this letter from the board and sent it to each select board chair.
yeah,
And that's what I did, and I asked for them to reach out to our board chair or to see if, the request was from the board
yeah.
to be put on an agenda to discuss this. And
That was
we have
only,
not heard from.
that was last meeting, which was
That
2 weeks
was.
ago, right?
Yep.
So they might have only met once, maybe, some of the boards,
Yeah, I don't know what their schedules are.
so they can say no, right?
They can.
Super expensive.
If only one of them says no. then
Right, if only one
Right,
of them
yeah.
says no.
Yeah. So we know, Joanne's gonna be attending
And Peter.
Franklin, and Peter's going to tomorrow
Yep.
here in Franklin. So we haven't heard from,
I
they've been
can
scheduled.
send them to the town managers, if that would help.
Okay, yeah, we can try that.
Well, the other thing I don't know is if, I don't know which you've heard from, and I don't need to know now, but, I don't want to, get ahead of anyone, but I mean, I can follow up with the chair in Swanton, for example, but I don't know if, and then the follow-up would be like, hey, did you get the letter, and where are you at with it, because we know it's kind of, time sensitive, because the decision's gonna have to be made by them probably before Christmas.
Right, in December, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
they might only be meeting once or twice more before Christmas.
That's true, December 10th.
So, any objections to,
I think it'd be good.
I think we need to do that.
Yeah, any
So,
board member can.
Did we see a copy of that letter? We did, didn't we?
We did, yeah, we approved that at our last meeting.
Because I wanna be really ready to say like, oh, I didn't get the letter, and I say, oh, well, here it is.
Yeah, it's in our board drive, so you
It's
can
in-
certainly
okay.
print it out.
Okay,
Yep.
And I did forward it because Wendy, yes, asked about it, so I forwarded it to her. So I can
That's a good idea.
do the same in Swanton, so that it's more than just the chair of the select
right.
board.
Yeah, there are other, yeah, I mean, I will bring it up with the select people I know
Okay,
in
yeah,
Swanton, if that's,
and we asked to have any of our members attend one of their meetings, so, if on the spot, they invite you.
yeah, well, I mean, I could go anyway,
You'll
or
be our
public comment,
representative.
but, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, we wanna be on,
I don't
Well,
wanna
we get on
be,
the
I
agenda
just don't wanna
and
be
things
speaking
involved.
on behalf of the board, because I can't, I'm just a board member, but I could be saying, did you get the
Yes,
letter
you-
from the
right,
board,
certainly,
and do you have any update?
yeah, and right, we wanna, and we do wanna get on an agenda so that they can make a formal motion one way or the other,
Okay.
if possible. So public comment would probably not suffice, I guess, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. If they don't wanna put us on an agenda, then I guess that's our answer.
So can I ask a question
Yep.
on that note? because we can't speak for the board. So, I mean, thank goodness, you know, Peter is going to be there, so he'll speak on behalf of me, but. So if the question is asked, are board members willing to volunteer to help? We just speak for ourselves. I am willing to volunteer to help, not speak for the board.
So I think as I recall, I think we maybe asked this question in the last meeting, because we said the district would help. The district would help in
Okay,
some way,
so
right?
we're comfortable
And we have the
if-
resources to.
I mean, it'd be
help
all
in some
hands
way.
on deck, but we
Yeah.
would be, you know, the challenge is, I know that town clerks wanna have eyes on the materials. So we print ballots, but I don't think they want us to show up with ballots in envelopes all day, because they're responsible under statute. So I understand that tension that they have, but we would do whatever we could to, take the burden off of them
Yeah.
as much as possible.
So that could
Peter will do
include
all
board
the talking.
members.
I was asked if students that need community service, is that something that they could do?
Well, one, I would struggle to take students out of their education for that. Usually their community service is done outside of school hours, so that's, and I also don't know.
Come on Thursday, they're open till 6.
We could certainly always throw that out,
Yeah.
but it would have to obviously be under the supervision of the town clerks and those folks.
So I have the Franklin agenda for tomorrow. The MVSD ballot vote discussion is on the agenda for 7 p.m.
Is there any role in this? Probably not, but for our MVSD clerk that we elect, which is NOLA,
Yeah.
right?
NOLA, absolutely.
I don't think there's nothing in statute or anything like
No, this
that.
is really, the statute says that it's it's the town's responsibility.
Even though we have a clerk.
We have a responsibility to the cost, but there is no, that doesn't mean she wouldn't be able to help.
See, that's
I haven't
another
talked to her, but it's-
legislative avenue. I mean, we elect
Yeah.
we have a clerk.
Yeah.
So we have a district clerk that's elected, and I always wonder, I didn't really know what NOLA did till last election, I think. And she's involved with the counting of the ballots, I think,
Yeah.
right? So, I don't understand why that,
Folks know.
I don't know if it was just an oversight or why it doesn't, does every school district have a clerk, an elected clerk?
Yes.
I don't
Well, then I'm
understand.
aware of it.
Yeah, but the town clerk's offices are the ones that maintain
The
the voter
voter
lists and the
registration,
voter
yeah.
files,
Yeah.
all this. You really have to have one entity that does that.
They're
You
in
can't
charge of
have
the election.
multiple.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the thing,
Yeah.
so I understand the reason, it really should stay with one entity. That doesn't mean we can't help them, but
Yeah.
It's true.
Thank you for that.
All right. Moving on to negotiations committee. So we are looking to form a committee and have the board approve a committee for the support staff union negotiations. Anyone like to make nominations?
Would like to make nominations.
All right.
I would like to nominate Jen, Terry, and Rennick.
Okay, Joanne has nominated Jen, Terry, and Rennick as our negotiations committee. Is there a second? Steve is the second.
I'll second that.
Any-
Go third.
All right, any discussion on that? Okay, those in favor of appointing Jen, Terry, and Rennick to our support staff negotiations committee, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Abstentions, vote carries.
I voted yes.
Yep, I got Dawn and I got Rennick as yeses. Motion carries 8-0.
Devin,
Yes.
after you leave this item, I wanted to comment on the previous discussion, but when I put my hand up, I don't think you saw it.
I didn't, sorry, but yeah, go ahead, we can circle back. We can do that now.
Okay, you know, I appreciate all we're trying to do to get that, cooperation, if you want to go, a partnership with the town, but I think we have to be real clear, that we understand, I think what I heard Pierrette say. You know, they're two different entities, fall under very different regulations and laws. And, with all of the stuff that's gone on the last couple of years about voter fraud and maybe wrong ballots and counts, fictitious maybe, but what people believe it. I can see where town clerks would not want us to in any way be involved with the ballots. So, you know, I voted against it, and certainly I can see the board.
We lost you, Don.
Yeah, it's just a bit of lag, I think. He's not muted.
Whole different municipal entities, so I think that if we don't get it, we shouldn't be too upset, because I think it's pretty clear who can do what. Just wanted to be on the record.
All right, thanks, Don. We did miss some of that, but we caught your concluding statement there. Unfortunately, you cut out. Now you're on mute.
My computer keeps saying, "Where's Frank?"
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the point there is well taken. You know, this ultimately is this decision of the towns, and whatever they decide, we'll be respectful of that decision. All right, on the committee updates, I'll start with the Board Goals Committee, and because we already did that, the board development topic at the beginning of the agenda was our entire, virtually our entire meeting. We, I guess, looked at some policies as well. Joanne, am I missing anything else?
No, talk about the purpose of the ordinance.
Purpose, yeah, we did talk about the purpose of the committees, and we'll talk about that during our board development session as well. Peter, facilities committee update?
So I think our minutes are linked here so everybody can see them, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. One of the biggest things we learned at the last meeting was the Franklin construction project. So due to inflation and other building costs, the 4.1 million doesn't get as much as it used to. So had to make some changes to the plans for the new addition. Had to make some cost-cutting changes, so I just wanted to update on those. So the biggest thing that changed is we're going to avoid putting in a sprinkler system, which was a major cost, and having to bring a line from the main road to the school. So to avoid all that, they had to make a hallway, a full egress, and adding fireproof insulation and fireproof barrier. And that obviously took up some classroom spaces. A note, the pre-K room, we did not have to rob from that at all. It's still going to be 1,200 square feet. So originally they were going to put the mechanical stuff up in the roof, and so that meant more support and structure for that, and they were going to have two dormers up there for air. They instead made smaller mechanical rooms, 3 or 4 of them spread out, to avoid that and having to put the dormers in. So that was another cost-saving measure, but again, it does rob spaces in different places. Not a lot, but it did make changes. I talked about the water line, won't be needed anymore. Another, I think, pretty significant change is the new addition will not be bricked like the rest of the building. They're looking at using cement board siding instead. We did have a lot of discussion about that. They're going to work with us to try to get it to match the current building as much as possible with colors and stuff, but and it does actually give us a better, a tighter building, and more energy efficient, but obviously it's not going to look like the existing brick, so, and also they're not gonna be doing the water line and breaking up that line, so they are not gonna extend the sidewalk like at one point we were talking about doing. And we talked about the elevation change. They did look at that again, but there seems to be no way to avoid. We will have to have, I think, 3 or 4 steps coming into the building because of the elevation. There will be a ramp also beside it, so we can get handicap accessible. So yeah, that's kind of the update. I don't know if you have any, Joyce, if you have any comments or any concerns on.
Thank you, hit it all. I have just one, the
Oh,
one
go ahead.
kind of unknown factor at this time is the investigation of the stormwater requirement.
Okay.
They did have a meeting today, but they're still investigating that and still working through that process. EEI is doing a lot of work on that, but that is still the unknown with this whole thing, so more to come on that.
All right, and then just a few other highlights. We talked about the roof that we talked about. We talked about performance contracting, lighting. Laura brought that up. We did have a fairly lengthy discussion on the Highgate outdoor classroom that we're looking at using ESSER funds for. That's looks like an estimated cost of $40,000. We did ask more questions, and we're hoping that Yashua can come to a board meeting at some time in the future and present to us what the real need for this is, because it is something new that we don't have existing. It's an extra, I know it's ESSER funds, but just to make sure that we're using that money wisely. I'm not saying at all that we aren't. I think it probably is, but we'd just like more information on why we need this. And so that's good. We also approved an investment in HVAC in the White Building. As you know, we've been trying not to invest a lot of money in that building because we don't know where that building's going or what's going to become of it. But HVAC, obviously, we're using that building, and it's important. So we did say we should be investing in that. So we did that. Highgate kitchen hood, MVU sign. We talked some about that. I think maybe as a broader board, we might want to have more discussion on the sign as well, maybe with the project with the outdoor classroom. We talked about the MVU sidewalk with the project that the town is putting together to bring a sidewalk up to MVU, about our responsibility of hooking on to that sidewalk, but as I understand it, that's not an immediate need or something that we need to be budgeting for, certainly not in this next budget. Talk a little bit about MVU property line adjustment. I don't want to get into that too much here. I think that pretty much covers our meeting unless anybody has any questions.
Don, your hand's up.
He's muted.
You're muted.
Just to go back a few minutes to the Franklin project, and I want to say that, Peter, you did an excellent job of, I think, reporting our meeting with EEI and where we are at. I think everything that they're proposing, certainly is workable. It did concern me, the exterior, like Peter indicated. But I think something that concerned me more is that we're very early in the project and we're making some pretty big decisions now. We said, okay, we needed a water line. Well, now we don't need a water line. We wanted brick, we're not gonna do brick. So it looks like we're revising the plan to save money, but yet not putting in a sprinkler system and a water line is a pretty big savings. So I would hope that this is not an indication of where we're going with this project, because usually in a life of a project like this is not a very big project, you have these things that arise somewhere along the line, you save some money here, you put it there. But we're pretty much in the initial stages, and I think we've been presented some pretty significant changes. So I want to stay positive and optimistic, but I think the full board needs to be aware that Peter's report, as well as he did it, really is a report, and there's some things that.
Yeah, so that was something that we were concerned about as well. Once we have the final numbers, the second week of December, and we move the next stage of this project, those numbers become locked. Unlike with projects we've done before, those numbers were always subject to change with change orders. So that was one of the first questions when we were pushing back on EEI. The initial numbers they got back were way out of whack, 20% different. So in order for this project to move forward, it has to be below the 4.1. Laura in particular was quite strident with them, saying that it can't change substantially, right? Because this is a project through the Agency of Ed using our BESSER. The design we can't just eliminate a classroom. You know, it had to be these kinds of changes. And by adding the exterior door and the things Peter eliminated, one of those big costs was the need for a sprinkler system. Once we get into that second week of December and they finalize, then that is a lock number, because that was something that we pushed on and said, so at what point does this become the real number? Because we can't do this, to Dawn's point. And so that's, I think, where we're at.
Yes, and that's been made abundantly clear.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say, the only caveat to that, of course, there's always the chance that you start to dig the hole for the new $6,000 or 6,000 square foot of new additional space, and you hit something, like you find something in the ground, like a dinosaur bone or a, like, I don't know. There are things that can happen that are beyond everyone's control, so I just always like to use that as, that's the exception to the rule, but for the rest of that is true, yes.
And Yeshua will be sharing the rationale and the data process on the outdoor classroom.
All right, which is our
This-
future budget item, agenda items. Highgate presentations is on that, because we're in Highgate in the month of December. We'll be looking at the budget some more. And then talked about board development. I don't know if that's not our next meeting, but the actual board development session will be 2 meetings from now, December 20th. All right, future board meetings. Our next scheduled meeting is December 6th at the Highgate Library at 6 p.m. for our business meeting and 6:30 for our regularly scheduled meeting. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Jen?
I just want to remind everybody that Skit Night at MVU is this Thursday and Friday night. If you guys can attend and support your local students, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'd like to pack the auditorium for that one. All right, now accept the motion to adjourn. Jen has made the motion. Peter's the second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We're ready to vote, motion carries 7-0.